All right, welcome to Menagerie, everyone. I am so excited to introduce our first speaker. Scott Gustafson has been a working illustrator for over 40 years, mostly doing children's literature, classic children's literature. And I know he has a lot of fans in our audience today. So Scott, why don't you unmute yourself and turn on your video and say hello to your eager audience. Hi, Scott.
Hi. Hello, everybody. Hello, Heather.
Thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, it's my honor and my pleasure. So shall we begin? I'd like to thank you and Alan for inviting me and to be part of this amazingly diverse group of people that are putting on this program today.
Oh, thank you. We are so delighted that you said yes. And yes, thank you, Alan Tannenbaum, for the assist there. I knew he had a prior relationship with you, so I made sure he helped cajole you into saying yes. So thank you for that. And sure, if you want to just jump right in, I will make myself scarce here. Thank you.
All right. I think this is a wonderful event. Like I said, I'm very honored to be part of it. And it's amazing to see how one man's imagination has touched and inspired so many of us. Everyone today probably has their own story or memory of how it was that they were introduced to Alice. My personal intro was in one of these books. It was a set of encyclopedias that we had in our playroom when I was a kid, and they were there from about as far back as I can remember. They were a product of the 50s, as am I, and these books promised to take kids on a journey to the wide world of learning. They were designed like textbooks or digests of information. They contained a wide variety of articles on science and geography, animal and plant life, history, stories, poems, and a lot more. Here's an example of how they were laid out. They looked like it would jump from one subject to another, and the only way you could make sense out of it was to look into the index to see if what you were looking for, where it was in this 10-volume set. But here's an example of going from the Tudors of England to tapirs and rhinoceroses.
Scott, I'm going to rudely interrupt you. I'm so sorry, but we can actually see my icon up above, and I think that's on your end. I'm pretty sure you can drag me out of the way. There we go.
Oh,
there
okay.
You go. Perfect.
Right,
thank you.
Okay. Thanks. So where was I? Oh, yeah. So in volume 3, I came across Alice. It was an abbreviated version. At that time, I never read the story, and it wasn't read to my brother or I by my parents. But I was about 3 or 4 years old when I first remember coming across it. And I did look at these black and white pictures. There were a number of them of Tenniels, obviously, and they intrigued me. And I thought they were kind of strange looking. The strangest one being this one. To be honest with you, I thought it was disturbing and creepy. This girl's face, what was happening to her neck. I think I might have even had nightmares about this. But this image I knew that it was Alice in Wonderland, and I knew that there was something going on here, but I just didn't understand what it was all about. In a way, this picture kind of fit in with the rest of the book. There was a lot of pictures in here that to a 3 or 4-year-old look kind of strange and sometimes creepy. So basically, it kind of fit in. In retrospect, it seems appropriate that I should have first met Alice in a book of knowledge for children. Since so much of Carol's story relies on playing with and distorting the knowledge that young audiences had learned, it seems fitting that I should have found Alice in Wonderland nestled between articles on how plants reproduce without seeds and the master painters of Venice. Anyway, we jumped ahead a slide there, but this is what I went on to do after high school. I was always interested in drawing. I wanted to be an animator, I thought at first. I went to art school thinking I was going to do that, went to the Chicago Academy of Fine Art. And but I also studied some illustration while I was there. And when I got out of school, it turned out I was more drawn to doing illustration than doing animation. So one of my first breaks in children's books was to be able to do The Night Before Christmas. And I liked fantasy, but I liked to make it believable. I liked historical settings and doing research so that if I found something that I hadn't known up until that point, maybe I could work it into the picture. So this was a great experience for me. And the company that had published this also asked me to do Peter Pan, which was another great opportunity. It's a wonderful story. The characters are really classic and fantastic. And it was a real joy to do this, but it was a challenge as well. The plan was to do 50 oil paintings. They weren't all on this scale, but some of them were. This one in particular was. I had to find models for all these kids because that's how I work. I use model reference. I shoot photographs of people in costume with the right lighting. I also actually built a model of this interior and lit it so that I had an idea of just what I was going to be dealing with. I don't think I would do that today, but at the time I felt it was necessary. So given that I took this much time developing these pictures, what was supposed to be a 2-year project turned into a 3.5-year project. Here's one more illustration from the book. It was a good learning experience for me. I was working exclusively on oils for those 3 years, and I hadn't done that prior to that. I worked with acrylics and other faster drying mediums, but it was great to really get a chance to learn about oils and work with them on a daily basis, which is what I'm still doing today. These books, Peter Pan and The Night Before Christmas, were seen by a company actually here nearby to Chicago, where I live, in Niles, Illinois, the Bradford Exchange. Now, a lot of you might remember collector's plates and the ads that they used to run, the Franklin Mint. There were other companies as well. They were particularly popular in the 80s and the 90s. And you'd see them in either women's magazines primarily or in Sunday supplements. They did a lot of advertising. But as you can see, the plate was round, and I designed the picture to work both as a circle within a circle crop and as a rectangle, so that someday, after its life as a plate was over with, it could also be a book illustration. After I did that, I ended up doing 8 fairy tale pictures for a series. And then they asked me to do nursery rhymes, which I was happy to do and really enjoyed that. It turns out I was enjoying kind of finding a niche doing classic children's things. Nursery rhymes you can't get too much more classic than that. I really enjoyed this series, ended up doing 8 of these. But when the Bradford Exchange saw this picture, they thought and asked me, do you think you'd like to do a series of Alice pictures? And I jumped at the chance, but because by this time I'd actually read the book, both books, and had actually been working on sketches of my own, thinking that someday would be great if I could illustrate the book, or at least maybe do 1 or 2 illustrations that might be done as prints or posters. So this is what I call and what are known as thumbnails. They're small. They're probably 2 by 3 inches. I can do a number of these on a page, and it's probably hard for you to see what's going on, but with a couple of scribbles, I can give myself an idea of if the idea that I have for a composition is going to work. So probably the most recognizable thing is you can see the rabbit in that middle, and that's the white rabbit running away, and in the background are Alice and her sister on the riverbank. But I had some of these things already existing by the time Bradford approached me to do a series. So I'd been thinking along those lines and had some ideas. Here's one, the upper one is a double page spread whereas the other one, the one to the right, is a single page spread. The Bradford Exchange had some rules as to how I was to approach the series. First of all, they wanted well-known scenes, like, for instance, the Mad Tea Party. They wanted the characters to be recognizable and appealing, so I couldn't go off on some kind of a tangent and make them really unique. They had to kind of skew towards the classic one, Tenniel's designs. And their last rule was that they wanted Alice to be 2 or 3 years old. I had to give them some trouble about that. I said, "Are you kidding? This? I don't know if you guys have ever read this story, but she's got to be at least 7 or 8 years old to have these conversations and do the things that she does." They said, "Okay, we'll compromise. How about if she's 4 years old?" So what they had found with their testing, and they did a lot of it when they did images of 2 to 3 year old children. They found that was the most likable, appealing era in a child's life, and they wanted to capture some of that. So we went with a younger Alice than I would have originally chosen to do, but that's the way it had to be.
I don't know what 2-year-olds they're running with. Scott, I'm so sorry to interrupt again, but we've had some requests from the Peanut Gallery for you to turn your camera back on. They don't need to see, my icon, but they would love it if you turn your camera back on so we can see you in the corner.
All right. Well,
that's why you kept getting that "please turn on your video" message on the screen.
Okay. Well,
I'm not sure how to.
We'll keep trying to do that. We're not as technically.
Hold on a sec. Let's try.
Well, I mean, the art is the important thing, of course. And don't worry, we'll edit all this out in post. It'll be flawless.
Okay. Well, we're.
Should I try sharing the screen again?
No, if you just click the little camera icon, it should turn his video back on. We caught a glimpse of him a second ago. Yeah, I don't know why I reappear when you do that. I've never seen that happen. But yeah, if you want to hit share again. Like where you are now is perfect, Scott. Off to the side there is great.
Okay, but we want. Oh, it goes away. That keeps being your icon.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, that's. Yeah, if you can, you know what? Why don't you pull me almost all the way to the side so then it's not.
Okay.
Because yeah, I have no idea. I've never seen that before. That you can't get rid of my icon. There's also a setting. Oh, you know what? If you go up to view on my controls, it's at the top right of the screen, view. You can click hide non-video participants, and that maybe should do the trick.
Oh, she just did that and it didn't. Well, I will be, when I answer questions, they'll be able to see me.
That's true. Yeah, no, you're right. No, the important thing is the art.
Sorry.
I just wanted to let you know because some people were asking, but that's
Okay,
totally fine. Resume.
Right, so
I'm sorry to interrupt
that's our
again.
first major glitch.
Oh yeah, no,
so
I wouldn't even call it major. Don't worry about it.
All right. So they decided to go, well, okay, those were 3 sketches that I did of various scenes. And we can go back maybe. Yeah, so there's the caterpillar and Alice and the Cheshire Cat and the Tea Party. They decided to go with the Tea Party, obviously, because it's probably one of the most famous moments in the story. So as you can see a little bit better here that Alice is young, and the characters are fairly kid-like. I mean, they're more. I'm thinking more about making this kind of a child story again than trying to give it more of an adult spin. Okay. So they picked that composition. I went to work gathering my reference. I found a model, shot her, started working on the characters and developing them more. I had a friend, another illustrator, who was willing to pose for all the other characters. He was everything from the Dormouse, Mad Hatter, and the March Hare. And I do that. Yeah, that may seem silly, but I do that so that I can see how the costumes hang on a real body, how the light affects them. And it's just very helpful. So here's the finished composition, the finished drawing, but it's reduced, and I make a Xerox of it, and then I do a color study on top of that. And as you can see, this is pretty rough. You can still see the Xerox showing through. It's just with acrylic, and it's just to give myself an indication of what the color is going to be. Because once this gets bigger, this is probably 6 by 8 at the largest. When this goes up to the full size, which on this piece was about 32 inches by about 26 inches, I believe. Anyway, it's harder to make changes at that point than it is here. So I do that, and then went on to do the finished piece. And this is, of course, that finish, and you can see that it's a full rectangle, but it'll be cropped so that a lot of the things around the edges won't show for the plate, but they'll be there for to fill out the picture for other things. Also, I just thought I'd point out that in Tenniel's version of the March Hare, he had what looks like a bird's nest wrapped around his ears. And I realized, oh, I think that's a play on words. I think it's a straw hat. So I decided that I would make, or a hat made of straw, I decided that I would actually make a straw hat. So that's why he's wearing that. All right. So next, they said, well, look, kept going with the series. I ended up doing 3 or 4 pictures altogether. This is the caterpillar, advice from a caterpillar. The fact that there's a hookah in this picture really got me thinking, like it does a lot of illustrators, going down heading for Eastern things with, well, we'll go to the finish. Worked in the fact that he's pouring himself a cup of coffee out of one of those Turkish coffee pots, the rugs, the pillows, everything has kind of an Eastern flavor to it. In fact, I like the idea that those are arabesques of smoke wafting up through the air there. I kind of had this idea that it's like you're pulling a beaded curtain back and stepping into an Eastern smoking den. So anyway, okay. And next they wanted to do the Queen's Croquet Ground, which ends up being, as you can see in the upper right, there basically is the composition that I designed. And then here are pieces of it as I develop them and do studies. So there's the hedgehogs and the cards and the white rabbit in his costume. And that's together with the finish. There's the color study, but you can kind of tell by the way the shadows fall just where the circle is going to end and where the crop for the plate will be. So it's all the things in the center. Everything around the edges is not going to be in the plate. So fast forward another 26 years. I hadn't done any Alice since that was in the early 90s when I was doing those for the Bradford Exchange. I went on to do other things, got involved in a lot of other things, but decided that I wanted to try my hand at some Alice pieces again. And I thought it would be fun because Alice is so packed full of great characters. Every page she meets some new fascinating character and they've got a lot of attitude. So I thought it'd be fun to try my hand at some of those without worrying about building big compositions. So started with Alice, and I ended up doing 2 versions of this. I didn't like the first one, which was a smaller one on the left, and ended up trying to make it look more like the little girl whose name was Katie, the girl who posed way back when for those first Alice pictures. I also, up in the upper right-hand corner is my monochromatic. That's the underpainting. That's how it starts. And then I gradually add color on top of that. So that's just a part of it. that I happened to take a picture of to compare it to how it looks as a finished thing. Also did a dodo. I decided I wasn't sure at this point. This was only the second picture in the series that I was planning to do. I wanted to use a lot of color at that point, but when I tried to put them together, because I thought, well, someday they might all have to kind of go side by side or something like that. I couldn't get all this diverse color to work with each other. I also started thinking, that back in the day, back in Victorian times, sepia pictures were very popular, sepia photographs, and Carol's photographs were sepia tone. So I thought it would be more appropriate to try maybe doing them in limited color. So I tried another version of the dodo. This time I went a little more elaborate with the costume, thought I'd have some fun with that. I did the small full figure up in the upper right-hand corner. I couldn't decide, did I want just a close-up of them or did I want it pulled back? I ended up pulling kind of in between. So I got kind of a upper body shot, but I went full out on the costume, decided to make a lot of fun out of doing textures of his costume and everything. And here you see, there's the underpainting, which is very much like a sepia tone picture. And then I added just a little bit of color, and even those colors are basically in the earth tone palette. So that set the tone, literally, for the rest of the series, the pictures that I did in the series. Here's the Cheshire Cat. There's an early composition or early study of him. Ended up developing him a little further. And then here's the final. And here's the underpainting. On this one, I couldn't decide whether I wanted him to be in full view or did I want him to be kind of disappearing. And so I did both. As you can see, he gradually fades here. I, of course, can't do that with individual paintings, but I did two paintings at the same time and made them in sync with each other so that eventually we could do a time lapse like this. But there are two separate paintings, one of him like this and one in full view. Also want to do the March Hare. He's a great character. I couldn't decide if I wanted him I thought I was going to do him with his ears up, but I realized that was taking up too much space, too much picture space. So I laid his ears down and I actually liked it better. I don't know how many of you are familiar with European hare, but naturally they've got kind of a mad look about them. So there's something to work with. You don't have to take them too far to get a kind of a crazed look from these guys. And this is the underpainting and the final. As you can see, I warmed it up from the underpainting, but I didn't take it too far. And here's a dormouse. I originally thought, well, maybe I'll do him looking at us, just kind of, standing there full and kind of use the rest of the frame to show how small he was. But I don't know how many of you are familiar with real dormice, but they're about as cute an animal as you can get. And the fact that they hibernate and sleep in this curled up position with their tails wrapped around them, they really are pretty adorable. So I thought, might as well keep him as he is in the story, put him in a chair with a pillow and have him that way. And here he is with the underpainting and the final painting. And this was a really fun series to do. As the Mad Hatter as well, to finish off the tea party. And here's a guy, I couldn't figure out if I wanted him, how I exactly wanted this portrait to be. Should he be gesturing? Should he have his hat on? Should he have his hat off? As I was also looking at a lot of Victorian portraits, photo portraits this time, I realized that men of the period, I guess they didn't have pocket combs or they didn't have mirrors, or maybe that was just the hairstyle, but a lot of their hair is pretty disheveled in these photographs. And I thought, well, I'll play that up. And there was one in particular, that old photograph that I had. And I thought, I'll take his hat off. He'll be holding it in kind of a classic way, but I'll really mess that hair up. I messed my own hair up and took photographs. And that was how that was done. Here's the underpainting and the final. I also found I like to use real people as a basis for some of my caricatures. So I discovered that George Arliss, the old actor from early films, would have made a great Mad Hatter. So I based it on him. You wouldn't call this a portrait, and you probably couldn't even recognize him. But for me, it was a starting point. Then there was the Queen, and she's based, I decided I would go ahead and base her on the Queen appropriate to the period, which was, of course, Victoria. Now we've got a time lapse on this one, and we'll see if we can get that to work. So here's the finish. Okay, we're going to go through a quick step of how, okay, there's the background. I transfer onto a board, the line drawing, start working in elements gradually. This could have been over the course of a couple of days. Start adding color. And things kind of, as you can see, they start to slowly develop. I'm working around the whole picture. The flamingo's being developed. Her face is a little more refined. Things in general just start getting finished. The color starts getting beefed up. And now here we have the final. So that's kind of, you can see that would have probably been at least a week-long process of that actual painting. But you see in a few seconds kind of how it all comes together to form a final piece. All right. And here's the White Rabbit. He's another great character. I didn't know at the time when I first started these portraits, are they going to be in environments that are part of the story, or are they just going to be isolated portraits? I decided to go with the portraits just because I like the idea of doing portraits. And there's the final illustration with the under painting. And since he's a white rabbit, he's got to have pink eyes. So there he is. And there's the whole set. We call that the Alice collection. But once I finished this, and I enjoyed it so much, I thought, well, maybe it's time to try my hand in another full-scale illustration. And started doing sketches on the mock turtle and the griffin. They've got a long scene. There's a lot of stuff that goes on. I tried various moments from that and found that I thought the idea of her reciting to them was a good opportunity. So I worked on those sketches. And I decided, usually I build a composition based on what's happening and all that. But on this one, I took the poses and I wanted to develop how the best pose for each animal. And then I built the composition around that. So up in the upper left-hand corner is kind of the final sketch that I came up with, but I built it on the drawing board, which you see here in the middle. I kind of brought pieces together and pasted them down and moved them around. So it was an interesting kind of practice. Now this is Alice. I didn't have any pictures of the original Alice that posed doing this exactly. So I had to get reference from other materials, other places. But I got to the point with her in this final one on the right that I was happy with. And also worked on the other characters at the same time, had different versions of the griffin that I worked on. I found that there's an eagle called a Philippine eagle that I think is really interesting. I decided to use that animal as a basis for my griffin. And here's the mock turtle. Now I found that the mock turtle, you have to do homage to Tenniel when you do the mock turtle, because he drew the first mock turtle, and if you draw anything else, it just doesn't look like a mock turtle. So got him worked out. And this is how the whole composition came together. You see the final drawing up in the left-hand corner, the color study, and the final painting. It was, as you know, this part of the story takes place on the seashore. So I tried to work some of the real landscape from the English coast into the background. I also put a lobster in there to kind of include the lobster quadrille idea. And once I finished that, I thought, well, might be time to do a few caterpillar studies and think about doing more portraits. So I did that, worked on him, and decided to go in a different direction when it actually moved along. I kind of liked an elongated head, and I was trying to go for a Sidney Greenstreet type, but that didn't work out. But once again, I liked having the smoke as part of the composition, and I like keeping him kind of blues. I think he was blue in the story, right? Here's the fish footman. This is just an example of having fun with a fish character. You know, I don't usually do fish characters, but to dress him up in a costume and have this great hat, I found all this reference. It was really a lot of fun to do this guy and his companion, or his scene mate, the frog footman. And same thing here. Frogs are fun. It's kind of cool to work with such unusual features, and then to dress them up in livery was another extra added treat. This is, of course, the cook. She seems to be the embodiment of anger and always throwing things, ready to fight. There's an old actress who was in Robin Hood, and she was in The Invisible Man. Her name is Una O'Connor, and I started with Una O'Connor and kind of worked with that. She never played a character that I know of that was this angry, but she had a great look. And of course, the Duchess is there in the house. And as much as I admire Tenniel's version, I wanted to do something different because his is so specifically his. And they based it on that famous portrait that's supposed to be of the ugliest Duchess that ever existed, I guess. But I decided to go. There's an old actor named Ernest Thesiger who was in, you would probably know him from The Bride of Frankenstein, and he plays Dr. Pretorius. Anyway, I thought putting him in drag and making him the Duchess would be fun. And then, of course, we have to end with Alice holding what started as a baby and turns into a pig. I didn't have any photos of Alice or the little girl that posed as Alice with this kind of an expression on her face, but I did have some pictures of our son Carl when he was that age that I had him pose for something else and giving me this expression. So I was able to kind of blend those two features, the girl and our son, and come up with this portrait. And it was really fun to put the pig in the Victorian nightgown and cap and have it lying there like it was ready to walk off into I guess it runs off into the woods. Here's the king. I went with a kind of a King Henry type just because of the clothing. And I'm trying to keep the clothing looking like playing cards as well. And also have him interacting with these flamingos are great because who would want to be used as a mallet? And I tried that show them, conveying that feeling. I went with an old actor named Hugh Griffin, who's been in a lot of movies, but he has a great face. So I decided to go with him as a starting point anyway. Then there's the mock turtle, which as I mentioned before, you kind of have to start with Tenniel. It was great using a real calf's face since he cries so much in all of his scenes or all his moments, I wanted to make him look like he'd just been crying. So there's a bit of tears that kind of welling up in his eyes, and they're kind of pink. And it's great to do sea turtle bodies. Here's the griffin. Now, Griffin mentions while he's talking to Alice, he's very curious about something. And I thought, well, we've got a collie that when she's curious, she kind of tilts her head like that. So it's not quite that much. I exaggerated it more, but this is kind of a blend between her ears, and the way her head tilts and the ruff around her neck. So I kind of blended this griffin in with our collie to get this kind of curious griffin look. And that's the second collection of Alice portraits, and that's kind of the end of my presentation. So if anybody's interested and want to ask questions, we'll see if we can get my picture back up on the screen. And here's our website if you're interested in any things. We have prints of some of these things. So anyway, let's see if we're
Screen. There we go.
okay. Great.
Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect.
Good.
It is so fun for me, and I know for everyone here, just to hear the joy in your voice when you're talking about these characters, just when you give a little chuckle, when you describe how you came up with things, it's just really, really special. So thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, you're welcome.
And we've got some questions here from the audience, very specifically about your process. Merle is wondering, generally speaking, how long does it take you to get from thumbnails to finished painting?
It depends, like on the portraits, it could have been anywhere from, it probably was averaged about 2 weeks, probably. By the time I actually worked out how I wanted the character to look, did studies, and then had the final painting in my hand. With a bigger picture, like, the one behind me here, this probably took 4 to 6 weeks to do altogether. So yeah, it just varies.
Right, that makes sense. And I mean, we have several people in the chat and in the Q&A just clamoring for you to illustrate a whole book
of
Alice. Do you think that'll ever happen? Do you have the urge to do that? Or
I don't know. It's been a while since I've done a whole book, and they are quite a commitment. Trouble is, I kind of have to put aside everything else and concentrate on a book when I do a book project. So these days, since I enjoy the variety that I've been doing in my later career, like being able to jump from doing a series of Alice portraits to then maybe a final, and then the next week maybe doing a series of dog pictures. It's kind of been nice to break it up more, but it's always there as a possibility. And I guess part of my long-term thinking was that what if I, just in the course of doing pictures, eventually assembled enough that I could make a book out of it. So there's always that possibility.
All right. And our audience is just, they're very greedy is what they are. They're also all wondering, well, what about Looking Glass? Would you like to do some Looking Glass characters?
Yeah, I've gone with, I'm more familiar with Wonderland, and I've stuck to that because I'm so familiar with the characters and stuff, but I am going to start going into revisiting Looking Glass and seeing what's there. I know there's a lot of great characters there as well.
Well, I'm sure that's great news for everyone here. Now, Stephanie has a question that actually kind of adds on to something I was going to say. It was so fun learning the real life people that you modeled some of these characters on, or at least got inspiration from. And Stephanie is wondering, not an Alice question, but do you remember who your model was for Peter Pan? Your painting of him landing in the children's rooms holds a very large place in our life. Oh, that's so nice.
Oh, well, that's nice. I actually can't remember the boy's name. It was 40 years ago, but he was at the time, I was a young illustrator. I was unmarried, and I didn't have a lot of friends that had kids that were that age. So I went to a friend of mine was very close to some of the people in the grade school she'd gone to, and they let me come in and pick from their stock. And there was a boy there sitting in, I think it was like a third grade, fourth grade class. And I just thought, boy, that's him. That's Peter Pan, red hair. He looked great. All the other kids from the book were in that school as well, but he was, yeah, I took a lot of pictures. I think his first name was Mark, but he was a great kid, great, and I enjoyed painting him.
Nice. Let's see. Anonymous is asking, I read you were interested in animation early on. Have you done any art for animation, and what made you settle on illustration perhaps instead?
Like I said, when I was in high school and early in college, I really thought I was going to be an animator. I was almost convinced that was it. But I also enjoyed drawing and painting. And when I got out and I was still in Chicago looking for work, this is the late 70s, there was little or no animation work here, and there wasn't that much work going on in California either. It was kind of almost the end of animation as we know it. It was before The Little Mermaid came along, so that anytime we heard of a feature coming, it was years ahead of time. Oh, so-and-so's working on a feature, and we'd wait for it. Anyway, it just didn't seem like a good prospect, good job prospect. And I also started picking up illustration work and realizing, you know what, I like doing the whole process. I like designing the composition, designing the characters, painting it, and seeing it come to finish. Whereas when you're doing animation, at least in the old days, you had your job to do, backgrounds, layouts, animation, whatever. But you kind of had to stick to that. So I like the variety of doing it, doing illustration work.
Is there any book that you're just wishing someone asks you to do, or would you just do it on your own and say, hey, everyone, I gotta have this body of work, somebody publish it?
That's probably more like Alice would be fun. It would be great if someone asked me to do Alice. I would. That's still on in my bucket list. But off the top of my head, I can't think of any, because I've been kind of picking and choosing and doing various things these days. I haven't really landed on something that I wanted to commit myself to for that period of time. Like I said, Peter Pan ended up taking 3 years. Some of my more recent fairy tale books have taken 2 years. So it's a commitment that, I'll forego until the plum project comes along.
Yeah, 3 years. That is a rather large chunk of your life, isn't it? Wow.
Yeah.
Let's see. Mark Richards is wondering, and this was a common theme as well. I'll be sure to send you the chat transcripts so you can see all the wonderful comments, but also just people saying how they were taking notes and how much inspiration they were drawing. I was wondering if you've ever considered doing any sort of instruction or a book about drawing. And Mark Richards is wondering, have you considered publishing any of the original sketches? Because those are so special.
Yeah, we have a number of quite a few up on our website, and from time to time we do run step-by-steps of various pictures that I work on. So there is some of that. I've never. This is premature, but I'm talking to a publisher about maybe doing the art of book in the future. And part of that, I'm planning on doing a step-by-step, picking at least one picture and going into detail about each step and how it develops. But as of right now, I haven't planned on a full book devoted to that. But if you visit our website, there are step-by-steps.
Methods.
It's called, we have a method section.
Oh, great. All right. Very good to know. And by the way, everyone, the wizard behind the curtain there is Pat. That is Scott's wife and business partner. She's running the presentation today. So thank you so much, Pat.
Oh,
yeah, exactly. A very big thank you to Patty, because I wouldn't be, you wouldn't see any picture if it were up to me, right?
Excellent.
You probably wouldn't hear my voice either.
Well, it's so great to have you here. I want to thank you so much. Oh, wait, someone just dropped another question in. I'm going to go for it here. Are there any current artists that you find especially inspiring?
Yeah, there are a lot, and I'll probably draw a blank right now. Somebody that I've known for years and admired his work is Peter DeSev. He does a lot of design work for animated films. He's also done New Yorker covers. I think the last month, New Yorker, or last week, couple of weeks ago, he did a New Yorker cover. He's somebody I really admire. Thomas Blackshear is somebody else that I know and admire. like I say, I'm just drawing a blank right now. But
Those
there
are some
a
good
lot, and
answers.
when I go online, I'm always blown away by the amount of talent there is out there.
Oh, when I go looking for illustrations for my little montages, yeah, it's overwhelming, and just
Yeah.
so many different versions from other countries is what gets me. Like, just so many amazing Russian versions in the last few decades, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
And you know what? I'm gonna end our segment here. Just Merle in the Q&A just says, "I so appreciate hearing your thoughts and experiences. You always inspire." So I think that is a lovely note to end
Well,
on.
I agree with you. That's very nice. Thank you, Meryl. Anyway, well, thank you again for inviting me. It was great to be part of this.
Yes, thank you so much. And yeah, and everyone go to Scott's website if we do have a lot of collectors in our midst. So everyone go check that out. And also his methods, as he said, you were all asking about, the sketches and whatnot. So thank you so much. Thank you, Patty, as well.